One of the things that makes Anglicanism unique is our incredibly rich artistic and intellectual heritage. Many of the people who shaped our world, our nation, our understanding of science and the literature, the art and the wisdom of the Western world have sprung out of Anglican Christianity. Sir Isaac Newton, who set the foundation of the theory of gravity, who helped develop calculus, who discovered the laws of motion, was born into the Anglican Church and is buried in Westminster Abbey. Francis Bacon, who developed the scientific method and was a central figure in the birth of the scientific revolution, was an Anglican Christian. Fred Astaire, the great American actor, was an Episcopalian and a member of the Episcopal Actors Guild. Humphrey Bogart, here's looking at you, kid, was an Episcopalian. Charles Darwin, the founder of the theory of evolution, studied theology and for a while wanted to be ordained in the Anglican Church. He never was ordained, but he continued to be an Anglican Christian through his life. T.S. Eliot, the great British author, poet, and playwright, not only converted to Anglican Christianity, but he served as the warden of his church, St. Stephen's, Gloucester Road in London. C.S. Lewis, theologian and prolific writer who wrote such famous books as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Mere Christianity, was an Anglican Christian for most of his life before he eventually converted to Roman Catholicism. So, how about the American presidents who were Episcopalians? Our first president, George Washington. Our third president, Thomas Jefferson. Our fourth president, James Madison. Our fifth president, James Monroe. Our ninth president, William Henry Harrison. Our 10th president, John Tyler. Our 12th president, Zachary Taylor. Our 14th president, Franklin Pierce. Our 21st president, Chester A. Arthur. Our 32nd president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Our 38th president, Gerald Ford. And our 41st president, George H.W. Bush. Benjamin Franklin, one of the great founding fathers of our country, an influential scientist and the inventor of bifocals, and who was on the $100 bill, was an Anglican Christian. Alexander Hamilton, the guy who did a lot of things, but honestly now is most known for the amazing Broadway play telling the story of his life, was a member of Trinity Episcopal Church in New York City, and he's buried in that graveyard. Norman Rockwell, the famous artist, and George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, were both Anglican Christians. John Polkinghorn, an astrophysicist and the current Astronomer Royal of Great Britain, is an Anglican priest and theologian. Jerry Garcia, hey man, cool, yeah, the guy from the Grateful Dead, was an Episcopalian too. Reese Witherspoon, who is legally blonde, has been an active Episcopalian since childhood. Former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and current Justice Neil Gorsuch are Episcopalians. Robin Williams was a proud Episcopalian who put together a now famous top 10 reasons for being an Episcopalian. The Queen is obviously an Anglican and is the head of the Church of England. The Confederate General Robert E. Lee was an Episcopalian and was the senior warden of Grace Episcopal Church in Lexington, Virginia. For a while, that church changed its name to Robert E. Lee Memorial Church and was affectionately referred to as St. Bob's. In recent years, and for obvious reasons, they dropped his name and reverted back to the previous name, Grace Church. Francis Scott Key, the author of our national anthem, was an Episcopalian. And Elton John, the original Rocket Man, the Crocodile Rock, the Candle in the Wind, is a member of the Church of England. I guess that's why they call it the blues. These people aren't just indicative of our past, but of who we are today. We are a church that has a firm grasp of and solid relationship with science. Our last presiding bishop was a marine biologist before she became a priest. We're a church that welcomes people's questions, doubts, and intellectual journeys, and we like to see God's reflection in the beauty of creation and in the arts. While we're at it, how about some famous churches in the Anglican Communion? Westminster Abbey, the 1,000-year-old church in the heart of London where royal coronations take place and where British monarchs are buried. St. Paul's Cathedral, London, is the magnum opus of Sir Christopher Wren. Its great dome, which towers over London, survived the blitzes of the Second World War. Canterbury Cathedral, the seat of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the spiritual center of the Anglican Communion. On social media, it's known as #1 Cathedral. On this side of the pond, there's the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. It's the largest Gothic cathedral in the world. You could fit 2 football fields end to end in the cathedral and still have some room left over. The Statue of Liberty could stand under the Great Dome and her torch wouldn't even touch the ceiling. Remember Paul Revere's famous ride, "The British are coming, the British are coming." He was going to climb a church tower and put 1 lamp if they were coming by land and 2 if by sea. That church tower was Old North Church in Boston. St. Paul's Chapel of Trinity Church in New York City is the church where George Washington prayed in on the day he was inaugurated as the first president of the United States. It's also directly opposite the World Trade Center. On September 11th, 2001, the day of the horrific terrorist attack on our country, the church sustained no damage whatsoever, and it became a place for rescue workers to rest, eat, and recuperate. Brewton Parish, in the center of Colonial Williamsburg, dates back to 1677. When Williamsburg was the capital of the Virginia colony, this church was at the center of civic and religious life. St. John's Church, Lafayette Square, is directly across the street from the White House and is therefore known as, unofficially, the Church of the Presidents. Every single president since James Madison has attended a service there. It always hosts a prayer service for the new president on Inauguration Day. And while we're in D.C., there's the National Cathedral, or more formally known as the Cathedral Church of St. Peter and St. Paul. This magnificent church was originally conceived of by George Washington himself, who wanted a house of prayer for all people. Construction on this national cathedral began in 1906, and it was completed in 1988. There is not one iron girder in this entire structure. It is completely constructed by one stone lying on top of another stone. It's the cathedral for the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, and it's also the cathedral for the presiding bishop of the United States. It hosts many occasions of state, including funerals of presidents.